entry at the site as well. Uh, Come this way, please. We all fit by this side. So this is a sketch of the Oracle of Delphi based on the excavations up to the 1890s. Based on those excavations and descriptions that we have from the ancient days. We are not allowed to stand on the benches, please. This is what we're going to explore when we get to the site. Just a few important locations, like the Roman Agora. We will see the ruins of the Roman Agora. That was the reception area, the entry of the sanctuary. We will walk on the sacred way, the Via Sacra, that was fully decorated with statues and cauldrons that we do not have anymore, at least the vast majority of those. Then we will see the treasury of the Athenians, and we'll talk about the concept of a treasury. And we will continue a little bit further up to the Temple of Apollo. That was the key point of the whole sanctuary, because that exchange of questions and answers, questions and prophecies, that was done in front of the Temple of Apollo. It was the heart of the sanctuary. So it wasn't a residential place. Keep that in mind. We're talking about a sanctuary. So only the priestesses are living here. The residential area was further closer to the sea, the Corinthian Sea that you saw. That was just a shrine dedicated to Apollo. And pilgrims arrive from all around the world, but they do not stay here. It's just for pilgrimage purposes. And let's continue this way. The clay figurines that you see on your left-hand side, it's the earliest proofs of human presence here in Delphi. 1400, 1300 BC, the Mycenaean, the Bronze Age as we call it, the Mycenaean civilization. And they are figurines of women raising their hands, praising to Goddess Mother Earth, that was the predominant deity in the prehistoric religions, or it can be depictions of hers. The fact that we have that doesn't mean that Delphi back during those days was a shrine. Because, for example, in many houses in Greece, they have icons in them, but that doesn't make your house a church necessarily. So probably they were objects used for domestic cult, for domestic purposes. Then you see a cauldron. That's around 700 BC. It's made out of bronze. And that was the most representative gift that Apollo, the sanctuary, would receive back then. It started having a daily culinary use, but as it grew bigger, we added more precious materials like bronze, and they ended up being very common offerings to the sanctuaries. And those were embellished with those heads that you see, griffin heads, the sirens, mythical beasts. They would be placed all around the edge of the cauldron. It's bronze. And here, all artifacts that you see here is 700 and 600 BC, and they are all exotic, imported. They were not gifted by Greeks. So it's shields, the paws, could be the endings of furniture, any other bronze element that could be embedded on a wooden artifact, on a wooden piece. And it is a proof of the international profile that Delphi had. So we may talk about ancient Greek religion here, but the prophecies, this place being an oracle, made it very prestigious. So it received visitors from any corner of the world. So from Egypt, from present-day Turkey, present-day Iran, further east. So all those are imported and show that international fame that Delphi had back in the day. It's bronze, 7th century and 6th century BC. On the walls, we have a photo exhibition of Robert McCabe, who was here in the 1950s, and he took photos of some monuments of Delphi. You can, yes, you can take pictures. Please enter the room so that we're not blocking the way in and out. And let's stand closer to that big sphinx that you see in front of you. So as you know, we traded a lot with Egypt back in the... Let's come closer, please. We traded a lot with Egypt back in prehistoric and during classical antiquity. So inevitably, apart from commercial trade, there was also artistic and intellectual trade. That's why the early statues of the Greek art have a very strong resemblance to Egyptian art. And we adapted their sphinx with two modifications. Ours is female, whereas the Egyptian sphinx is a male beast. And ours is standing on the two back feet. We're not lying on the ground. Now, this is marble. That pink shade is because of the bauxite that the local soil has and reacted with the marble. You have to imagine that that's the base of an ionic column that ends here, that was almost 9 meters high, and on top of it you have the Sphinx. That was dedicated by the citizens of an island called Naxos, in between Mykonos and Santorini, and it was a gift enough to grant them the promancy. Promancy was like a VIP pass, because as we're going to discuss, this oracle was open only 9 days a year and not consecutive. So if you wanted to get a prophecy urgently, if you were a city, if you were an empire, if you wanted to organize a war, then you couldn't wait and risk a chance. That's why by offering and donating lots of money and artifacts to the sanctuary, whenever your committee was here, they could simply skip the line and go first to the temple. So the people of Naxos, that's my grandfather's island, they gave this Sphinx back in 560, 570 BC. And all around you, the reliefs that you see are decorations, friezes that decorated different monuments of that period. It's 6th century BC. The themes are taken from mythology. It's in pieces, so the Sphinx is different, the capitals are different, so they brought it in pieces.
There's a great explanation right over here about the explanation right there. Exactly what she said. But if you want to take a picture, you'll have that. Go with.
And revise it. In Athens, at the Acropolis, you will see what we call the caryatid, which is a statue that serves as a pillar at the same time. A pillar that has the shape of a statue. This is the earliest example we have in art. This is 550 BC, approximately. The ones that you're going to see at the Acropolis are 430 BC. So this is the earliest example of a caryatid, a pillar that has the shape of a statue / column. Let's continue this way, please. So again, here at that next room is there. We have Egyptian-like statues. Please come closer so that we leave that corridor open. Whatever you see here in the museum was found at the site, so it's a local museum. We haven't brought anything, something from another place. It was all found in the excavations. So those two were found together. They are the twins of Argos, as we say. That is an ancient Greek city close to Corinth. And they have a tragic story because, according to the myth, their mother was a priestess of Hera, and she had to go to the temple. However, the horses were not there yet. That's why they took her on their shoulders and carried her to the temple, and then they went to rest. While they were resting, their mother asked for the best present a man could ever wish for, and the gods offered them death. Because back then, in ancient Greece at least, in order to understand the background mentality, it was very common to fight, to die in battles, hit by barbarians, far from home. So it was a great privilege, it was considered a privilege to die in peace, accompanied by your beloved one. So those two, they were born together and they died together in peace. Now again, we have Egyptian-like statues with two modifications. The Egyptian statue has always the 2 feet stuck together. That's why it always needs a retaining wall at the back, a support wall. We've placed the left leg a step forward, so the statue is balanced and we can skip the wall. And we've added this smile, which is as mysterious as the Mona Lisa smile. Nobody knows what it's for. The Egyptian statues show no emotion, and because that type of a naked man could be athlete, mortal, immortal, alive, dead, someone important, someone anonymous, a god or a human, it was the standard depiction of a male person in ancient Greek art. That's around 530 BC. And probably one of my favorite rooms is in here. Yeah, the face is still, it's exotic with the almond-shaped eyes and the cheeks. So the Oracle of Delphi as a sanctuary had a life of 1200 years. And it was necessary to enter with an offering in your hands. So you can tell that the amounts of artifacts that have arrived here throughout those 1200 years have been immense, uncountable. There were catastrophes, natural catastrophes, fires, and also from time to time there was not enough space for the new artifacts to be exhibited. That's why they dug sacred pits, as we say, in the ground, and they buried all those old or destroyed artifacts inside. We found one from 6th century BC. The tiny things are bronze or ivory ornaments that were decorating a much bigger artifact of materials that have decomposed. And here we have a trilogy of statues. It's Apollo, Artemis, his twin sister in the middle, and Leto by my side. The dark black, the rough surface is ivory, burnt ivory, restored with wax tinted black, and the other is gold, is pure gold. And here we have another statue. The core was made out of wood, and with nails they fitted those silver, that's a silver sheet, and for the shaggy parts, horns and paws, we have bronze. We suspect that that was brought from Asia as a gift of those famous Persian or kings, of Lydian kings like Croesus, 6th century BC. We know he was here, he had sent a committee here. And imagine, my point is that in that display, you saw the content of one sacred pit that represents a moment in time, and we're talking about 1200 years at this place. And I've shown you nothing cheaper than ivory, gold, bronze, and silver in here. So you can imagine the quantities and the wealth that uh, that that existed, that ended up here in this place back then. Let's continue. The statues that used to be the decoration of the temple of Apollo. So the horses, it was the horse carriage that brought Apollo and his family here. And the man, as you enter to the right, the man that stands on his own, this is Dionysus, Bacchus, who was also worshipped in this place. And there's a model here of how the sanctuary looked like back in the day. We have the entrance is of the sanctuary is down there where you see the explanation sign. There's the gate.
What door? Was it just open?
The temple, the Pythias were into this temple. So imagine that we have a rectangular structure with a colonnade around, wooden beams as the roof, and roof tiles placed above the wooden roof. This is how the temple looked like. But the sanctuary, it was a complex of different types of buildings.
So the prophecies inside.
Not inside, you were not as a pilgrim allowed to enter, so you would stand in front of the temple on a ramp. The priest would come out, get your prophecy. They would enter, as we're going to explain at the side, tell that prophecy verbally to Pythia. She would reply back verbally, and you got your prophecy in written form. And here's the catch. There's the catch. I'm going to explain at the side. Please. The python in mythology, it was the guard of the place, so he would be she. It was a she beast at the gate. And according to mythology, again, Apollo killed Python on that rock where later the Sphinx was placed. You see the Sphinx here on the column. That rock is still there.
Okay.
This is, again, a 6th century BC, the catastrophe. So anything before 530, 520 BC. Let's enter this way, continue. It's the jigsaw. It's like a jigsaw. And it depicts Apollo sitting on a throne, holding his lyre. It is embellished with a turtle shell. He's spilling wine on the ground. And we have this bird, black bird, who, according to mythology, brought him some bad news about his lover, who was the mother of the god of medicine, Asclepius. It's interesting to see how perspective is given by, look at his toe. It goes out of the circle, so that gives a sense of depth in the scene, a three-dimensional effect. And I also like how as the wine is spilled on the ground, how the pigment gets more and more fair until it vanishes completely. It gives that sense of motion and movement. 480 BC.
480 BC.
And on the other side,
Pretty old.
the fragments that you see on that big block, we're going to see them at the side again. They are musical notation. So it's they come from a treasury, the treasury of the Athenians. They contain the lyrics of a hymn dedicated to Apollo. But what makes them important is that above the lyrics, we have letters that serve as the musical notes, both instrumental and vocal. Facing one way, it's instrumental. Facing the other way, the letter means on this. We will see that at the side. So this is the the richest archive that we have. We can come. We can go closer now. I'm gonna stand here. So no, it was. Those we are not allowed to touch, please. Those blocks are the walls themselves. So the lyrics were carved onto the walls, and above the lyrics, all those little signs you see, Greek letters that serve as notes. 20% of what we know of ancient Greek music comes from this building exclusively. Θα σε προσπεράσω. And the most important artifact is, I'm standing next to it. It's the famous omphalos. Omphalos translates into the navel, the belly button, because Delphi was considered to be the center of the world for the ancient Greeks. And that was a gift by the Athenians, and it wasn't just like that. It was placed into a cauldron. The cauldron was supported over the heads and the arms of those ladies, and those ladies were the top of a Corinthian pillar that ended at this fragment. Again, that was almost 11, 12 meters high. And the Athenians had combined the two symbols of Delphi, the navel and the cauldron. The cauldron is was more like a swallow bowl, so you can see it at the sketch over there. And it's interesting to see those photos from the early excavations and the workers and the archaeologists posing on the ruins. And the statues that you see at the photo at the upper right corner are the statues that you see here in the exhibition as well. And the best is yet to come. That has to do with the restoration of the theater donated by Vespasian, the famous emperor. As we can now enter, please. That's on your left side. On your right side, that square base is what the Romans set in Delphi after the final conquest of the Greeks in 168 BC. So that was the memorial commemorating the victory of the Romans over the Greeks and the final conquest of this land. Before we go to see the charioteer, another masterpiece of the museum is Antinos, a Roman statue. We're talking about 2nd century AD. Antinos was a close friend of Hadrian. Hadrian was an emperor that loved Greece. He spoke Greek. He loved Greek and appreciated Greek culture, Greek philosophy. And some even say that the two were lovers, actually. For unknown reasons, he committed suicide at River Nile. The historians believe that it wasn't a suicide. He had a very strong impact on the emperor. So the rest of the generals and the elite around Hadrian decided to eliminate Antinos. So it wasn't a suicide. It was more of an assassination. Hadrian decided to elevate him and praise him across the empire by placing statue of his in any important city and sanctuary. So here we have one of the best with that very distinctive polished surface. This is Roman. There would be a tree trunk or a pillar here. The Romans could not statically support their statues that well if they stood on their own. So they added setting and landscape around the statues. And the holes that you see on the head, there would be a laurel wreath on the head as a diadem, because laurel was the sacred plant of Apollo in mythology. And two more things to see. Now, we are waiting here. We will wait here, and in the meantime, we can talk about the charioteer. So the narration of time ends here, because the charioteer takes us back to 5th century BC. Fifth, you ask them?
Thank you.
5th century BC. There were games held in the sanctuary. That's why there was a stadium, there was a hippodrome, a circus. And after those games, called Pythian games, the winners could set their trophies. Let's enter and stand by. Let's stand by the left side of the statue. Any other bronze statues that we have in our museums were found in shipwrecks, either on the way to Rome or on the way to Istanbul, Constantinople. So that's the only found in land, because there was an earthquake in 4th century BC, a few decades after its creation, that destroyed part of the sanctuary, made that statue fall off its pedestal. It was buried into the ground and forgotten until it was finally excavated in late 19th century. So that saved the statue. Otherwise, we would have found it in the bottom of the sea. It doesn't stand on its own. It's part of a greater complex where you can see horses, some fragments of the carriage equipment, and another arm of a second assistant charioteer. So that would be the full artifact. Now it is made out of bronze. Bronze statues were common, and there is a technique that we still use until nowadays. We call it the lost wax technique. So you get clay. You can all hear me, right? You get clay, and you shape the statue in very rough form with no big details. Then you add a layer of wax. Wax allows you to make very fine details that you cannot do on marble, and you can fix your mistakes, you can correct your mistakes. And then you add another layer of clay. You fire it, you have left some open holes, so the wax melts and flows out of that hole. And so you have the inner layer clay, solid clay, empty layer, blank, and then the outer shell, which is clay again. You pour liquid bronze through the holes, so wherever the wax was, you have bronze substituting it, and then you braid the clay in and out, and you get the artifact, the statue. So it's hollow from inside. Now let's have a look at some details. Come closer, please. At the back, you can see the heel, which is very realistic, and the hole too is anatomically correct as well, with the curve that our toe does. You can see the X-shaped strings that support his tunic. It's not just an X on its back, but you can feel the pressure and see the pressure on the back. The hairband that he's wearing is not attached on the head, so the two ribbons that fall, they're not attached on his hair. Those that stand on the side, you can see that. And again, you can see even the bones and the veins of the inner arm. And you can see the muscle here popping up as he's moving his hand up, lifting the reins. And the eyes, are made out of onyx magnesium. It's an ornamental stone, and we know that he even has silver teeth behind his lips. If I had last detail, if you had one shot, only one photo shot, that would be the eyelashes. They're made one by one. Bronze again. So take your photo, and I'm waiting for you down this ramp for the surprise I promised you. Of Achaia. Greece, the Greek land was divided in several provinces when we were under the Roman rule. So Corinth and Delphi and this part of central South Greece was Achaia. The consul was Gallion. So we have his name written here, Junius Gallionos. You see the gamma, A, double L, I, omega, and O. And it is a message from Claudius. He shows great interest about Delphi because there is lack of population, and they try to find a solution of how they're going to bring more people to inhabit this place and populate it. So thanks to this inscription, we managed to date the second missionary journey of Paul because we have the two names together, Claudius and Gallio. And the Roman calendar, as you may know, was based on the Roman emperor. So it would be the 5th year of Claudius' reign. It would be the 10th year of Hadrian's reign. And that's how they counted the years in Roman days. So since we have both names together, and we have Gallio mentioned in chapter 18 of the Acts, he's the one brought by the Jewish Corinthians to accusing him of disturbing the city and of disrespecting the law. So this is where we have Gallio in the Bible, chapter 18. We have Gallio here in the name of Claudius, and that's how we find the date, not of his presence in Corinth, but of the whole second missionary journey, 49 to 52 AD.
Nice job.
So this is Gallionos. It's in genitive form of Gallio. That is to say, it's right here.
So leather's so important to put it into the sky.
Because it was an imperial word, so that had to be publicly announced to the locals. Like not an order, but yeah, the emperor wanted this place to be populated. It's a letter from the emperor. We don't have Paul, we have Gallionos. Let me show it to you again. We have it Gallionos here, and we have Tiberius Claudius. So this is Tiberius Claudius Caesar, and he's the recipient, Gallionos. Claudius.
So is this the way it was presented, and where it's clean, these things are put in the right place?
There's so much. There's so much. So is your family. That's one Greek ship.
Yes. Great. Follow me, please, this way, the exit. And we're heading to the site. Ah, yes, it's an ongoing excavation. Please be ready for those steps. Heading up to the right. And there's going to be a spot at the shade for our introduction and explanation. Yep. When entering, after scanning the tickets, you go right. Γιώργο, τι κάνεις? Πού θα πας?
Let's grab a seat next to him.
It's too low. I need to stand up again.
Rather stand up.
I'm going to get a meeting set. Yeah, I'm going to stand right here. It's a lot more than you thought.
Is that an earthquake I felt?
Yeah.
In the sanctuary of Apollo, it officially starts there where you see that the other group standing by your right side and where you see those big walls. The columns that you see in front of you to the right, these are the columns of an arcade of the Roman Agora. So there was a reception area where people would gather. That's why it was called an Agora. And later on the Sacred Way, as the visitors also continue, you would find the many different offerings. Of course, the most expensive and the most precious ones, dedicated by the empires, the city-states of Greece, till you arrived at the Temple of Apollo. That was your destination as a pilgrim back then. So everything began around 800 BC here at this place, and up to 393 AD, when we have the closure of all those sanctuaries. Theodosius had already declared Christianity 13 years before in Thessaloniki as the official religion, so it was time for those pagan places to close, because they didn't represent a religion that was that present and powerful anymore as well. So we're talking about 1200 years of history at that site. Most of the monuments that you see date back to 500, 400 BC, and also the Roman days, 2nd and 3rd century AD. It was, as we've said, that place was open as an oracle. And when we say oracle, oracle has a double meaning. So it means prophecy, but it also means the place where that prophecy is given. So there has been a misunderstanding. Probably there was a film who created that. And many people ask me if the oracle is, where's a hole where you put your hand in, and nothing like that existed. When we talk about an oracle, it's the whole complex. So it's the oracle of Delphi. It's the whole sanctuary. And Apollo, according to mythology, he was present here for 9 months, because as he killed the python, he had committed a hybris, a blasphemy, so he had to self-exile himself. So rules were valid for everyone, not just the poor mortals, but also the gods, the mythical gods. So he left the oracle for 3 months, and that's how he was substituted by Dionysus. That's why you have this double presence here, Apollo and Dionysus. So during those 9 months of Apollo's presence, the oracle was open one day per month. You can imagine the amount of visitors, of pilgrims, of committees arriving here, mostly by sea, disembarking at the port that we saw at the end of the olive grove, because the landscape is quite mountainous. There used to be roads back then, roads of theirs, but it would be a much harder journey to arrive here by land. And those people would stand in line patiently waiting for their turn. There was a process to follow in order to get a prophecy. So the first stop had to be done in a cutting between the two big rocks. There is water flowing until nowadays. That was considered to be sacred by the ancient Greeks. Castalia Spring, its name. And you had to wash your hands or wash your whole body if you had committed a crime. And after that purification ritual, that cleansing ritual, you were allowed to enter. A second step would be at the agora, at that open square, where you would offer something to the sanctuary. Nobody entered empty-handed. And then you also brought a goat, a small a piglet, or a small animal to sacrifice. But before sacrificing it, you had to bathe it with extremely cold water. If the animal trembled, that was a good sign. Apollo wanted to help you. If not, you had to do that again and again. If the animal never reacted, they interpreted that as a negative sign, and they left. If the animal trembled, they sacrificed it in the end, and they were advancing further up to the temple. Now, nobody entered the ancient temples. That's the big difference with present-day religious structures. So you enter a synagogue, you enter a mosque, you enter a Buddhist temple, but you would never enter a pagan temple back then. Only priesthood could. So you would go up to the door, and a priest would come out. We have both priests and priestesses here. It's quite exceptional, because when Apollo killed Python, he did that because that place was already reserved to Mother Earth, Goddess Mother Earth. So since the old religion had to do with a female deity, Apollo decided that the most important people of this sanctuary would still be women. That's why we have this exception here of priestesses and priests serving a male deity, Apollo. So the pilgrims would go up to the entrance of the temple. A priest would come out, get their question, their prophecy, their question, and then they would enter. And inside the temple, there were the Pythia or Pythias. If the demand was higher, especially in Roman days, they added 2 or 3 Pythias in order to serve more people at the same time. In the Greek times, it was only 1. And the Pythias listened to that question, and they replied back with some incomprehensible sounds. The legend says that they were chewing laurel leaves. That's the sacred plant of Apollo, but nothing happens with that practically. However, we have a reference of Plutarch, who's an ancient author, and he was a priest of Delphi, saying that from time to time there are Pythias dying, and there are Pythias during other periods that they cannot reach that ecstasy state, that trance state. So that caught the attention of the geologists, and they came here and they noticed that Delphi, the whole place, lies over the intersection of 2 tectonic faults, one running horizontally, one running vertically down to the valley. And where the 2 faults meet, we have a mission of gases that contain ethane, methane, and ethanol. The temple was right on that intersection. So when you have Pythias dying, that's because of the excessive emission of those gases. Those substances are also found in the waters of Castalia spring. Nothing happened if you drink. Sometimes I've drunk several times. I believe that nothing has happened. But they had to drink every time they gave a prophecy from those waters. So little by little, they accumulated those substances in their body. So this is how you explain why some Pythias die. It's when the fault is open and you have an excessive emission of those substances. And Pythias that cannot reach the trance state when the fault is closing. Of course, you cannot, the Pythias didn't say anything in particular. According to the ancient Greek religion, it was Apollo using their body, their mouth, and the voice as a means to communicate with the people. And the priest, however, understood what was said. They wrote down the prophecy, and that prophecy, that answer, was given back in written form to the one who had requested the prophecy. As you've seen in ancient Greek inscriptions, there's no punctuation, there's no lowercase letters, and no spaces. So by structuring the words wisely, you can make ambiguous phrases. And there are some examples that prove that Apollo ended up being always right, because the result was predicted one way or another. A blind man came and asked if he could ever see again. And the prophecy was, you should look at the eyes of the mother. He went back, looked at his mother, and nothing happened. And many years later, accidentally, he stood in front of a statue of Leto, the mythical mother of Apollo, and he saw again. But technically, any mother could serve this prophecy. Just look at the eyes of the mother. Then we have a soldier asking if he would survive the battle. I'm going to translate it directly from Greek to English. It said, you go, you come, not die in the war. So if you place comma before not, it says, you go, you come, not die in the war. But if you place it after not, it says, you go, you come, not die in the war. So any outcome was predicted. And there were cases, we have famous prophecies given to Croesus, to Persian kings, to Egyptian, to Roman generals, legislators. Those seem insignificant. They are. But we have also prophecies given to Cleisthenes, who was the legislator who introduced democracy in Athens. And in order to convince the Athenians and the oligarchy of the Athenians to quit their rights and give public vote to 45,000 people, he had to use a prophecy given by Delphi, by the priesthood here. So there were prophecies given that really influenced the world back then. The Greeks did nothing without consulting this oracle first. So any decision taken regarding battles, treaties, colonization, legislations, political systems, it was first decided here. And the priesthood, they could tell what the tendency was, because if there were a Spartan committee arriving, asking for a battle, and then there was an Athenian committee arriving asking for a prophecy for the same thing, they knew that something bad was about to happen. So they had a kind of a network across the world, and they could interpret the questions and understand the news and what was going on in the world back then. And according to what you offered, if you were a big city, you would get a more or less beneficial prophecy for you. That's why you need the promancy. It's keeping the line, but also demanding a more favorable prophecy for your benefits. So it seems very unromantic everything, but don't forget that for the ancient Greeks it was one of the biggest sanctuaries, one of the holiest places that they had. and they believed indeed that it was a prophecy sent by the gods here. The gods, those gods, however, they never gave, or the priesthood, they never gave orders. And that's the key. They never told you what to do. They told you, if you do this, then this will happen. So again, it's the free will. But by becoming here instinctively, you're going to interpret what you're told the way you want it to be done. As a last comment, Croesus, for example, that famous Lydian Richas Croesus, he wanted to attack Persia. And he came and said, can I go ahead with the war? The prophecy was, if you cross the river, you're going to destroy a very powerful empire. This is what he wanted to hear. He crossed the river, he started the campaign, but it was his empire that destroyed. And he even sent a committee back, a complaint form. And the Delphi simply told him to go back to the prophecy and read it again. And so you see that you practically do what your instinct tells you to do. It's never an order, it's just a statement, the prophecy given here. And that was up to 390, 393 AD. The people didn't abandon the place. They simply reused the structures as a residential area. Throughout the medieval days, it was all covered by a small village called Kastraki, Little Castle. And based on the ancient authors, we managed to locate Delphi, we simply expropriated the village, put it a kilometer away, and we started excavating already since the 1880s. And until nowadays, it's the French Archaeological Society excavating. That's why the signs are in English, Greek, and French here. The French Archaeological School alongside with the Greek Ministry of Culture always. I don't know if I mentioned that I think in Philippi I said that the agreement is that Greece stays with the tangible artifacts, the land and everything that you see is ours. The foreign school stays with the intellectual copyright of the excavation, the right to publish and to do the investigation. So intellectual rights is with the foreign school. The artifacts and everything you see, the land, the blocks, it's Greek. I don't know if you'd like to add something.
No,
Okay.
but if you want to ask, are you going to guide us the whole way, or is there a time that we should meet back that it?
I can guide you and show you a few spots further up. We can do that. You see how the quality of the terrain from that point onwards, a few steps, dirt, uneven ground. So I believe that if you don't want to follow further up, I'm going to just point out a few important monuments. Then you can meet us at the exit. You can go down this way, or there is another staircase that way, down to the exit. Restrooms, if necessary, are to your left. It's that stone building.
What time do you think they should meet if they're going to go some other place?
Now it's, let's say, 2 o'clock.
Fine.
Yes. Let's go real quick, just for photos and a few more explanations. Follow me, please. Yes, we're living in strict cloisters. So that was their home. This is where they arrived and end their lives here as well. They just step out. So it's beauty.
There was a group of families from the local village of Delphi that had the privilege to have their daughters nominated and selected as Pythias. So back then it was a privilege. And for any, Athens had again a group of families for as the princesses, in order to be the princesses of the Acropolis for Athena. And its local sanctuary had, there were families, noble families, that had this religious duty and privilege. So they were selected, and at the beginning they were young, but young and virgin women. We have an incident then violated and enter the man entered and violated them. So the rule changed and they started choosing middle-aged women that would not be that attractive. The Roman days onwards. So the choosing the Pythias were local ladies and the great privilege to be selected.
From a certain family or
It's a group of families. Yes, well, we're the local community.
I went up to the, I just didn't go up to the theater,
We call them Pythia.
but you can see the theater from here. It's good enough for me.
Yes, yes.
Then after the treasury, that pink gray rock that you see, this is where, according to mythology, Apollo killed Python, owner of the place. Yeah, the treasury is a place that belongs to a city-state or a union of states, and it served as their safe box. So the Athenians, instead of having their offerings scattered around in open air, they would place them into that building. It's the treasury of the Athenians, like their own private gallery. Athenians, and it was like a lobby of place, a place where they socialize. This for the Athenians here in the sanctuary. Is authentic. We haven't reconstructed a single piece. We found it as it is, and you see it's like a jigsaw. It's block into block without mortar in between. And on the walls, you see that we have plenty of inscriptions. There are about 800 inscriptions that talk about liberated slaves. So the slaves had the chance to gain their freedom, their political freedom. So there is we have 800 of those, all in Greek. The slaves could be Greeks. Most of them were Greeks. So when you conquer a city, you automatically make that population a slave population. And in the slave market, it was the African that were highly sought because of their robust body. When you go up the steps, the snake pillar that you see on the right, this is a copy of what you've seen if you've been in Istanbul. So that was the tripod of Platea, the memorial that the Greeks gave to Delphi, commemorating their victory over the Persians. The green snake pillar. The authentic is in Istanbul, at the Hippodrome Square, right opposite Hagia Sophia. It was taken by Constantine the Great. We are not allowed to step at that section, please. So that's the end of our walk. We are standing right in front of the Temple of Apollo. And where you see the ramp, this is where the exchange of questions and prophecies was done. That's the heart of the whole sanctuary. At the upper levels, there's the theater, and even further up, that's almost a hike, it's the stadium of Delphi, 178 meters long, its track, because as we have the Olympic Games in ancient Greece held in Olympia, here we had the equivalent Pythian Games held every 4 years as well, not coinciding though with the Olympic Games. And since we're talking about Apollo, who was god of music, harmony, melody, apart from the stadium where you have boxing, running, javelin throw, disc throw, you also have music and theater, musical and theatrical competitions as well. That's why you need a theater. That was the complex of the sanctuary of Delphi, the oracle of Delphi. The Pythias would be inside. There was a deeper room, not a basement, but it was like a hole in the ground where they would be sitting, and that lied where a spring was and water flew, and where the gases were also coming out, like a semi-basement.
All the time.
Depending on the geological period.
And that was here.
That was in the temple. Yeah. The Pythias would be always inside, and they would never come in contact with the pilgrims. The priest would come out onto this ramp, and the pilgrim would tell them what their question was, and then take it back.
Who trained the priests?
The priests, again, it's generation of from father to son. It's again a duty that is inherited based on family descendants. So one last photo, and we start going down to the exit.
Thank you. We've seen that original.
Yes,
And they have another.
an obelisk from Egypt.
Oh, from Egypt, yeah.
We go down the same way.